I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
The G7 used to be the G8. Barack Obama and a person named Trudeau didn't want to have Russia in. And I would say that that was a mistake, because I think you wouldn't have a war right now if you had Russia in. And you wouldn't have a war right now if Trump were president 4 years ago. But it didn't work out that way. But it used to be the G8, and now it's, I guess, what's that, 8 years ago, it switched over. They threw Russia out, which I claimed was a very big mistake. Even though I wasn't in politics then, I was very loud about it. It was a mistake in that you spend so much time talking about Russia, and he's no longer at the table. So it makes life more complicated. But you wouldn't have had the war. Other than that, I think we're going to accomplish a lot.
This is my video update on this Monday afternoon, June the 16th, coming to you from Nicosia, Cyprus. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with the war between Iran and Israel. And both sides continue to fire missiles at each other. Israel, I believe, they took out a top military Iranian official yesterday. So they continue to try and use these decapitation strikes to knock out the Iranian leadership. Iran, they hit the Haifa port. I believe they hit the Haifa port, and they took out a power plant in Haifa. Did some massive damage there. They continue to hammer at Tel Aviv. And Iran is firing less missiles, but the missiles are getting through. Less missiles and more destruction is what we're seeing from the Iranian side. So it does look like Israel's Iron Dome is not effective at all against the Iranian missiles. That's a very bad sign for, hey, my friend, how are you? Enjoy your day, Mr. Nicosia Cat. So, yeah, that's a bad sign for Israel when their Iron Dome is just not effective against the Iranian missile capabilities. Hypersonic missiles, I believe Iran is using hypersonic missiles. Not all the time, but some of the time. And they are doing a lot of damage. And of course, you also have the United States and NATO. They're trying to assist Israel in intercepting these missiles, but not much success. So it does look like the trajectory of things, the more this goes on, we're in our fifth day. The more this goes on, the more things tilt towards Iran. No doubt about that. Man, it is. Let's go in the shade. Which is why Israel is asking for the U.S., urging the U.S., demanding the U.S. start to fight Iran, to go to war with Iran. It is now clear to everybody, and I think this is the absolute consensus, whether you're looking at things from the Iran side, from the Israel side, the U.S. side, it doesn't matter. The consensus is that Israel, with the support that they're currently getting from the United States, is not able to defeat Iran. And so what needs to happen if Israel wants to defeat Iran and get some sort of regime change, if the United States wants to get some sort of regime change, then the United States is going to have to enter this conflict. And even then, it's not a guarantee that they will be able to get a regime change or to win this thing. But CNN put out an article. Even CNN put out an article saying that Israel underestimated Iran's ability to retaliate after its military leadership was eliminated. The article says the Israelis, underestimated Iran's ability to regroup after the Israelis had very successfully targeted the top leadership of the Iranian military and managed to kill several of them. Israel believed that they had disrupted Iranian command and control, but that idea was quickly revised. Now we see that Iranian missiles are successfully penetrating all layers of Israel's air defense systems, says Trita Parsi, vice president of Quincy Institute for Responsive State Policy. And an Israeli military advisor, or former military advisor, Yossi Melman, posted on X, "The euphoria was short-lived. On Friday morning, I asked whether it was even necessary to start a war, especially against the Iranians. The Shiites are historically willing to suffer. I mentioned their willingness to sacrifice, as they demonstrated in the 8 years of attrition with Iraq. I recommend that we cut our losses and turn to Trump to stop the madness with a reasonable agreement. Otherwise, we will end up begging for a ceasefire and Iran will refuse." And then we have a post from Israeli journalist Attila Somfalvi, who says, "If only 30 missiles were fired at Israel, then how can we explain this hole in our air defense this evening?" 30 missiles fired, and they did a lot of damage. Even CNN is saying that this thing is moving towards Iran's favor. They thought that the decapitation strikes were going to lead to regime change, in much the same way that the West thought the economic sanctions against Russia were going to lead to regime change. It's the neocon fantasies. So we do have some military movement from the United States military, and there are a lot of reports which claim that a whole lot of military assets in the United States are moving east. Where are all these military assets going? That is the question. From disclose.tv, just in, massive U.S. Air Force deployment underway. Over a dozen Stratotankers are heading toward the eastern seaboard with unknown destinations. Update, a group of 28 U.S. military aerial refueling aircraft was seen flying east across the Atlantic. So most people believe that all of these assets are going to the Middle East, and the U.S. is preparing to enter the war. I mean, really enter the war. The other theory is that the assets are going to Finland because there's going to be a military training exercise, a very large military training exercise. Someone asked AI Grok on X, what is going on here? Where are all these military assets from the U.S.? Where are they heading towards? And Grok, the AI, responded, the U.S. Air Force Stratotankers are likely heading to support the Atlantic Trident 25 exercise in Finland, starting June 16, 2025. This involves the U.S., Finnish, UK, and French forces with KC-135 Stratotankers from the 100th Air Refueling Wing. The eastern seaboard may be a staging point for transatlantic flights. Other possibilities like geopolitical responses or domestic operations lack clear evidence as no major crisis align with the timing. The deployment's scale suggests a planned exercise over routine movements. Okay, Grok. That's what Grok says. AI, artificial intelligence, everybody. So it looks like the United States is heading towards war with Iran. Maybe they are going to Finland for this military exercise. That's possible. But more than likely, the United States is moving its pieces in place for a strike against Iran. One thing that leads me to believe that the United States is preparing to go to war with Iran is that the Russian embassy in Israel has called on all Russian citizens to leave the country as soon as possible. There is a possibility of crossing the border with Egypt through a border crossing that is open 24 hours a day. Another sign that escalation is expected. So it looks like Russia is thinking that the U.S. is going to enter this thing. They have some information that the U.S. is going to start a big conflict. So they're telling their embassy staff to leave Israel ASAP, even if you have to cross the border in Egypt. Get out. Ah, boy. All right. So there are rumors that China, Russia, and Pakistan are coming to Iran's aid. And they are providing weapons to Iran so that they can help the Iranian regime survive this eventual onslaught from the United States. This is it, man. The United States, if Trump is really going to attack Iran, this is it. If Iran survives, then it's going to be a huge defeat for the United States and for Israel. If the government falls because of U.S. strikes, then things are not going to get any better. There's going to be a lot of chaos in the region. Do things ever improve after a regime change operation? They never improve. They always get a lot worse. Lindsey Graham is making the rounds on all of the talk shows in the United States. And Lindsey Graham, the U.S. foreign policy president, he is calling for war. He is calling for outright war. He is basically saying that the time is now. This is the opportunity. Iran is weak. The United States needs to get into position to remove the Iranian government.
I said as clearly as I can say, if diplomacy fails, Mr. President Trump, you've been great. Help Israel finish the job. Give them bombs, fly with them if necessary. I cannot stress to you how, if you want to get Russia right, you want to make China be better, you want to convince international terrorism we mean business, you got to finish the job with Iran.
That is Lindsey Graham talking about finishing the job. Basically, his argument is that Israel started the job. They've started it, but they need the United States to help finish it. That's how they're framing this. Israel got it underway, but now we need to help them finish this thing out. That's Lindsey Graham. And Netanyahu was also appearing on U.S. TV, on the news shows, and he was speaking with Bret Baier.
When did you tell President Trump you were going to launch these strikes?
Look, I've been in constant contact with President Trump. We've known each other for many years. And obviously we informed our American friends and President Trump, our great friend, ahead of time. We did. He knew about it, of course.
I mean, there were reports that President Trump kind of helped you achieve your strategic surprise by publicly urging you not to attack when he already knew you had decided to do it. So you were closely coordinating with the U.S. throughout this process.
Look, we're fully coordinated, but understand that America, under President Trump, will make the decisions that are best for America.
Bret Baier also asked Netanyahu about the report from Reuters that Israel and the United States were coordinating to assassinate the supreme leader of Iran. the big decapitation strike against the supreme leader, the political leadership, the spiritual and political leadership of Iran. And Trump vetoed this, according to Reuters. And Netanyahu was asked about this from Brett Baer. He said, "Is this true?" He said, "Is this true?" Prime Minister Netanyahu, did Trump veto the assassination, the decapitation strike of the supreme leader of Iran? Here's the article from Reuters. Trump vetoed Israeli plan to kill Iran's supreme leader, U.S. officials say.
There is a Reuters report just moving saying that President Trump in the last couple of days vetoed an Israeli plan to kill Iran's supreme leader, according to 2 U.S. officials. Is that true?
Actually, there's so many false reports of conversations that never happened, and I'm not going to get into that. But I can tell you, I think that we do what we need to do. We'll do what we need to do. And I think the United States knows what is good for the United States, and I'm just not going to get it.
Okay.
That.
So that was Netanyahu saying there's so many false reports of conversations that never happened, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm just not going to get into that, he said. So which one is it? Which one is it? Did Trump veto this assassination or not? I'm not going to get into that. False reports, there's all kinds of false reports. I'm not going to get into that. So some people believe that if this is true reporting from Reuters, that Trump vetoed this operation because of the fatwa that Khamenei has, which is for Iran to not obtain nuclear weapons. And the analysis is that Trump did not want to take out the supreme leader because he has the fatwa saying there will be no nuclear weapons for Iran. So that's one of the reasons that they say this report might be true, and that's why Trump vetoed this initiative, this operation. It's amazing, huh? Open talk. They're openly talking about assassinating the supreme leader of Iran. Then you have this post from Chris Menahan, who says the phony story about President Trump supposedly vetoing Israel's plan to kill Ayatollah Khamenei is just a cleanup job to try and distance the U.S. from Israel's strike after Trump spent the past 2 days insisting the U.S. knew everything about them. Trump's statements justified Iranian strikes on U.S. personnel and went against Secretary of State Rubio's insistence the U.S. was not involved in the strikes. Trump's claim last night that the U.S. had nothing to do with the attack on Iran tonight was part of the same cleanup. If Israel could have killed Khamenei in their decapitation strike, they would have, and Trump would have dutifully said how excellent it was after the fact. Yeah, could be a cleanup job, a way to try and distance Trump from all of this. Who knows what to believe anymore from Trump, from the Trump White House. All we're getting from the Trump White House is mixed messages and cover-ups. All kinds of cover-ups. Starting from the airfield strike in Russia to everything that's going on between Iran and Israel. And what did Trump know and what did he not know, and how involved is the U.S. and how uninvolved is the U.S.? We're just getting all kinds of excuses and cover-ups and all kinds of games being played. And what's at risk here is Trump's entire presidency. That's what's at risk here. Trump's entire presidency as he is heading towards a war with Iran. His entire America First policy is about to go down the drain as he moves closer and closer to a U.S. war with Iran. And his White House, his communications team, it looks like they're trying to make all kinds of different excuses, and the excuses are all mixed up. All the messaging is all mixed up. He's sending all of these military assets to the Middle East. At least that's how it looks. And at the same time as all these military assets are heading to the Middle East, Trump is talking about getting some sort of a deal. That's how mixed up the messaging is. He was asked about his call with Putin and about Putin possibly being a mediator in all of this. And Trump said, yeah, I would be open to it. He is ready. He called me about it. This is what he told ABC News' Rachel Scott when asked about Putin's potential role in brokering peace. We had a long talk about it. We talked about this more than his situation. This is something I believe is going to get resolved, Trump added. So if you're Trump and you're serious about resolving this this conflict, and you are going to advocate for Putin to mediate a resolution to this conflict, because really, that's the only way out of this mess for Trump. That is the only way he's going to get out of this thing, is if Putin takes over the mediation of this. Anyway, you agree and you say, okay, I'm in a huge mess. I've got to let Putin handle this. If you're actually going to make that decision, then why are you sending all of these military assets to the Middle East? And there are reports that the U.S. military is also sending assets in the Pacific, that were in the Pacific. They're now diverting them to the Middle East as well. So it's not only military assets in the U.S. that's being sent to the Middle East, possibly being sent to the Middle East, but we are getting reports that that military assets in the Pacific are also being routed to the Middle East. Why would you send all of this stuff to the Middle East? Because Netanyahu's going to see all of this, and he's going to say, all right, Trump is on board. Who cares what Trump is saying to the media? Who cares what he says? Look at what he's doing. We've got all of this U.S. military equipment heading our way. Mixed messages from Trump. He's not playing it straight, man. He's not playing it straight, and it does look like he continues to try and deceive, and it's not working. It's not going to work out for him. Anyway, let's move on, and let's talk about Project Ukraine. We had an interesting article from the Telegraph, the UK Telegraph, with the title, "Fighting Russia is Now Europe's Problem. America is about to leave the stage. Promises of supporting Ukraine ring rather hollow if we continue to give paltry military aid." It looks like the UK Telegraph is finally realizing that this thing is lost. Project Ukraine is lost. When you read through this article, the Telegraph says that Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon has made the decision for no more weapons to Ukraine. The United States and Trump, they're more focused on the Middle East. They're completely focused on the Middle East. And all that's left now is Europe and Ukraine manufacturing its own weapons. The Ukraine military production, Ukraine's military production. That's all that's left. And the article actually says that while Europe is saying that they're going to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, and they're going to give Ukraine all of this money from all of these funds, a $150 billion defense fund and an $800 billion defense fund, the UK Telegraph actually admits what we've been saying on this channel and on the Duran for a long time, which is that all of these funds, which Ursula is talking about, or at least all of this money for defense that Ursula is talking about, it's just all it's all a grift. These are all funds that Ursula wants to put together that EU member states can voluntarily put money into, and then maybe this money will translate into weapons, which will then go to Ukraine. It's all fiction. This is all a grift. It's Ursula doing what she does best, which is to create these funds which go nowhere and just enrich the pockets of the globalist kleptocrat class. And it comes to the conclusion that the only thing left for Ukraine is its own military production. That's all that's left. That's the UK Telegraph. It talks up Ukraine's military production. It says Ukraine's military production is going well. It's able to manufacture various weapons. It says some of the weapons it actually manufactures are better than what the collective West has provided Ukraine. That is what the UK Telegraph says. But it comes to the conclusion that imported things like artillery and shells is something that they're not able to manufacture. And the most important thing in this conflict that the Ukraine military is not able to deal with, and that they're losing a lot of, is, take a guess, men, soldiers, people. It paints a pretty, this article from the UK Telegraph paints a pretty grim picture for Zelensky and Ukraine. Can Ukraine survive just on its own resources and Europe's intermittent money? The deepest irony of all is that much of the Kremlin's lavish defense spending is directly financed by Europe itself, which is due to spend over $20 billion buying oil, gas, coal, and uranium from Russia in 2025. And this article also admits that the Russian economy and the Russian war machine just continues to get better and better, continues to grow with each passing month. The Russian war machine and the Russian economy gets stronger and stronger. That is what this article actually admits to. It also says that Europe sends billions of dollars to Ukraine from interest from the Russian frozen assets. It sends $1 billion this month. It sends another $1 billion the next month. It sends another $1 billion the next month. They just recently sent $1 billion from the Russian frozen assets last month. The Russian frozen assets in Euroclear generate $1.5 billion in interest per year. But the collective West is sending billions and billions and billions to allegedly to Ukraine. And they say it's all coming from the interest from the Russian frozen assets. Yeah, give me a break. They're dipping into those funds big time, man. Anyway, Zelensky, he is absolutely starting to freaking panic, man. He is finally realizing that he's in deep poo-poo. And Zelensky is now trying to figure out a way to get attention back on to Project Ukraine. So what did Zelensky think up? Well, he sat down with his military and security officials yesterday, and Zelensky said that Russia is preparing strikes against Ukrainian nuclear energy. Russia is planning further strikes against energy, which may be less visible to the world now due to the focus on the situation in the Middle East, Zelensky said. He allegedly passed on this data to the IAEA, Trump's Representative Witkoff, and Pentagon Chief Hegseth. All right, so Russia is going to attack Ukrainian nuclear energy. That's what Zelensky and his military officials thought up in their meeting in order to try and get some attention back on to Project Ukraine. So that's a good lead into Clown World. And let's start off with the king of all clowns, Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson posted a TikTok video where he is ranting and raving, not about Ukraine, but about going to war against Iran. Boris Johnson is now talking about striking Iran and getting a regime change in Iran. So even Boris Johnson has moved away from Project Ukraine and is now talking about regime change Iran. Even Boris Johnson. Et tu, Boris? Et tu, Boris? Et Podolyak. Et tu, Boris? Yeah, man, Zelensky. Even Boris Johnson is leaving you. Even Boris Johnson.
Everybody knows that when the Israelis try to retard the Iranian nuclear weapon program, the Israelis are doing the world a huge service. So why doesn't the British government just come out and say what they believe and what everybody knows? Why don't they support what Israel has done? I'll tell you why, because it's all about managing the growing anti-Israeli feeling in the Labour Party, the growing anti-Semitism, I'm afraid, in Labour rank and file, and it's nothing to do with the national interest.
Boris Johnson is the British clown version of Lindsey Graham. That's what Boris Johnson is. He's Lindsey Graham, but in a clown outfit. That's Boris Johnson, man. Oh boy, Macron. He said that France will defend Israel if Iran attacks it. Good to know that France is ready to fight. And from the Toronto Star, this post from Father's Day, which was yesterday. Happy Father's Day, late Father's Day to everybody. On Father's Day, it's crucial to recognize the importance of mothers, writes Mark Bolguch. On Father's Day, it's crucial to recognize the importance of mothers. That's coming from the Toronto Star. And this article got community noted, and the community noted is pretty good. The community note says, we do. It's called Mother's Day. And it has a Wikipedia article to Mother's Day. All right. That's the video, everybody. theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and X. Go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch like what I'm wearing in this video update. There is a link in the description box down below. Take care.